welcome to I-24 News Defense Magazine, your weekly review of strategic affairs, security, intelligence, and more, brought to you in cooperation with Israel Defense Magazine. Tonight we discuss the latest bloody developments in Iraq and explore Israeli Defense Forces' use of dogs. But before we begin, let's take a look at what else is happening in the world.
We begin in China, whose first aircraft carrier successfully finished a series of tests during a training mission in the disputed South China Sea and has returned to port. Last month's drills off the coast of Hainan Island marked not only the first time China has sent a carrier into the South China Sea, but the first time it has maneuvered with a kind of strike group of escort ships US carriers deploy. The aircraft carrier has now docked at port in the northern city of Qingdao. During the drills, it was escorted by 2 destroyers and 2 frigates, and aircraft and submarines also participated. Moving to England, 4 US Air Force personnel died after a military helicopter crashed Tuesday evening near Clay on the North Sea coast of England, 180 kilometres northeast of London. The Pave Hawk HH-60G helicopter from a British base in Lakenheath had crashed and the 4 people aboard were killed. The RAF base said the crash occurred during an evening training mission while the helicopter was flying low. And an Israeli-made rifle has been named the winner of the 2014 Golden Bullseye Award conducted by the American Rifleman magazine. The rifle is the Tavor Sar, which was introduced in 2013 and is being used in various IDF infantry units. The prestigious award, now in its 12th year, acknowledges the finest products available in the shooting sports. Winners are selected by a 7-member committee and must meet or exceed the evaluators' expectations.
An eruption of violence in Iraq is threatening to undo much of what U.S. troops appear to accomplish before they withdraw, putting the country's stability on the line and raising the odds of a new civil war ignited in a region already buckling under the strain of the Syrian conflict. Before we discuss recent developments, here is the report by I-24 News correspondent Dennis Wiebel.
The White House said late Monday that surveillance drones would be delivered within a few weeks and more Hellfire missiles sent in the next few months to help the Iraqi government fight al-Qaeda militants.
I can add that in addition to those Hellfire missiles through our FMS program, we will also be providing 10 Scan Eagle surveillance UAVs in the upcoming weeks and 48 Raven surveillance UAVs later this year.
The move has reignited the debate over whether the White House should have left combat troops in Iraq and why Washington refuses to provide Baghdad with the F-16s and Apache attack helicopters that could turn the tide in the bloody fight to recapture key cities in Anbar province. The Iraqi government sent additional troops to surround Fallujah Monday, as Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki urged tribesmen in the besieged city to drive out militants of al-Qaeda's Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant Group, who are currently controlling part of the area. The nearby city of Ramadi is currently under the control of powerful Sunni tribes working with local police in order to dislodge any presence of al-Qaeda. But al-Qaeda militants continue to be sent to the city anyway, as Iraqi forces tighten their blockade and have begun to launch airstrikes that left a number of militants dead. Meanwhile, in the northern Iraqi city of Kirkuk earlier today, at least 2 people were killed and 40 injured in a blast targeting a police station. It was not immediately clear who was behind the attack, but it is becoming more apparent that Sunni al-Qaeda-linked groups have been regaining ground throughout Iraq, seeking to undermine the Shiite-led government.
Joining me now in the studio is Rachel Kantz-Fitter, a junior researcher at Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies. Good evening, Rachel.
Hi.
What is the main aim of the al-Qaeda-linked ISIS group in Iraq?
The ISIS is currently trying to establish their hegemony both in Iraq and in Syria. In Syria, they've been trying to force smaller Sunni rebel groups to pledge allegiance to them, and eventually their aims are to spread. Some say they currently have their sights even on spreading into Lebanon.
How did they become such a strong organization on these fields?
So it's important to understand that ISIS is an inheritor of the al-Qaeda group that was operating in Iraq during Iraq's most intense days of its sectarian war and its clashes against the American U.S. forces. ISIS certainly carries al-Qaeda DNA, but it's essentially an offshoot of al-Qaeda. In 2007, the U.S. government announced its Surge campaign, which saw the addition of around 20,000 troops to Iraq. And this campaign was to eradicate the al-Qaeda from Iraq. And the campaign was successful largely in due part to the cooperation of local Sunni tribal militias that also wanted to expel Iraq. These Sunni militias had previously been fighting against the American forces in Iraq, but because of the al-Qaeda presence in the Anbar province and their strict enforcement of their version of Islamic law, they managed to alienate the local Sunni population.
It feels like the past few months, Iraq's situation became bloodier than before U.S. invasion to the...
Yes, certainly the past year has seen a spike in an upswing in the sectarian violence. And it's important to understand that the resurgence of al-Qaeda, or we can call ISIS, has happened as a result of two factors. Because as I mentioned, when the U.S. launched its Surge campaign and were allied with the Sunni tribal militias against al-Qaeda, the al-Qaeda organization in Iraq essentially became extinct. Now, what's happened since then, because that was by the end of 2008, they were essentially extinct. What's happened since then, there are two major factors that have converged to allow their resurgence. The first is the spillover from the sectarian war in Syria.
Okay. Are we expecting another civil war in Iraq?
At the moment, it looks like it could devolve into such a situation, and it will depend on how Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki handles this crisis. The second factor, the first was the spillover from the Syrian sectarian war, and the second factor was the Iraqi Sunni widespread disillusionment with Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's sectarian policies, his affronts to many Sunni leading politicians, and his failure to integrate these Sunni tribal forces into the security apparatus.
Hopefully it will not impact the other countries in the region. Rachel, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Marine students of the Infantry Officer course at Marine Corps Base Quantico completed a proof of concept 1,100-mile long-range drill. They fast roped into a mock city to secure an embassy and rescue key U.S. personnel. Here is a look at the Marines' special capabilities developments here.
We're simulating going into a country that has some hostile intent towards the United States, and the embassy has come under some threat.
We're going to go fly in 60 Marines, fast rope them out of V-22 Ospreys, spend less than 2 hours on the deck, basically get in, execute our mission, get out.
Marine Air Ground Task Force, as part of the Naval Service, is ready to be America's crisis response force.
The Marines have been called in to evacuate certain key personnel of that nation.
I've got a picture of the ambassador. All right, some guys you'll see there. The ambassador's name is Ball. He's got an administrative staff there. Good there. Yes, sir.
What's different about this mission and where the Marine Corps stands today, primarily the aircraft behind us allows us to go over 1,000 miles. We can go even further than that. So in the past, you see the mission, 6 hours later, first aircraft lifts or first action to go ashore. Now, the moment the warning order is dropped or the initiating directive or any type of indication that there's a threat somewhere, a significant threat, we can lift these aircraft and launch, and we can be 2 hours closer to our objective area.
There's no reason that the Marine Corps at large couldn't execute these missions.
Moving on, in a previous magazine, we saw American working dogs in action in Israel, a country that experienced difficult periods of terrorist attacks. The use of military dogs is inevitable. Liran Musli went for a visit in the Special Border Patrol Dogs Unit.
Here, on a mountain by Jerusalem, the K9 unit of the Israeli Border Police is located. The unit was established following the terror attacks of the mid-90s. It aimed to find explosives hidden in bags and cars with the help of trained dogs. But over the years, its capabilities expanded to criminal investigations, searching for hidden drugs, missing persons, and even bodies. In the unit, 25 dogs: Alsatians, Labradors, and Belgian Shepherds, trained on a daily basis and treated properly by the unit's veterinarian. Each dog is paired with a warrior, and together they go through a 6-month training course, after which they are embedded in tasks.
I've always loved dogs and animals since I was a girl. I collected animals from the street and brought to my mother in order to raise them. Boone came to me at the age of 1 month. I raised him until the age of 1 and then brought him to the unit. I trained him, and today we're working in the field. Now he's 7 years old, and when he will retire next year, he will come back to my home. Boone finds explosives and weapons. For example, we entered a house and he marked the washing machine territories. The detectives started looking and did not see anything. Boone insisted on the washing machine. I said if he's on it, there's something there for sure. They searched again and found a weapon, all thanks to him.
The unit commander is Tamir Dalal. He reports of a large number of successes in detecting drugs, illicit money, and missing people in recent years. Here you can see how Erez sends his female dog, Zula, to find hidden explosives. Using its highly developed sense of smell, it does so successfully.
We present security for the country. The civilians, they see us in the places that we're working to. If they see a dog handler, they see the dog, they have a sense of security that we are over there.
It is easy to see that the unit maintains unique pride, professionalism, and a warm family atmosphere.
They say that the dog is like your best friend. So it is your best friend, is your soul. Working with the dog is not an easy thing, you know. It's a kind of animal that you work with him. You know how you feel every time. If you come sad to the work, you can see it, you can feel it.
Joining me now in the studio is Colonel Reserves Atai Shelach, former commander of IDF Elite Unit Yahalom. Good evening, Atai.
Good evening.
You come with years of vast experience in special operations. What is the biggest advantage of using combat dogs?
The combat dog, I have to remind, it's sound cruel, but they're biological robots. Mm-hmm. And they are replaced sometimes warriors in the most difficult and most dangerous point in several operations, and that's why we use dogs.
When you're saying robots, you mean it's easy to train them to do everything by just by telling them this is what I have to do, and it's easy to train them?
It's not easy to train them, but once you train them, so it's a very sufficient machine. Mm-hmm. You can, they replaced warriors, they can search houses, they can search every place that is dangerous. They can get in through the houses instead of warriors in the most difficult place, and they surprise the terrorists. Mm-hmm. It's a very good weapon, if we can call a dog a weapon, and that's why we use dogs.
And by saying that, you mean they save lives?
They save lives.
They save our warriors' lives.
They save our war lives in the most in the dangerous points, mm-hmm. and where we need them.
Okay. Weak spots.
Sometimes I will surprise you. Sometimes we use dog for rescue, search and rescue, mm-hmm. under houses. This is dangerous missions, and so we send the dogs. And sometimes we send the dogs to look for explosive thing, especially in the West Bank, where the terrorists are trying to make the new bombs. Mm-hmm. So you send a dog. And sometimes instead of go into a house or someplace they keep kidnapped, you send a dog. And this surprise, he had a very good hearing, he have a good smiling, he have a very sharp teeth, and he do the first act. And after that come the warriors. Not always, but most of the time with dogs in Lebanon, in ambush.
Right. In your experience, you have a special experience with using dogs on the field?
Of course, we use dogs or find or look for weapons, look for explosives stuff, even if it's in Lebanon and after that in Gaza Strip or in the West Bank. And even these days, unfortunately, we need to use dog once again because of the upcoming intifada, and we need them.
You're talking about upcoming intifada. Atai Shelach, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, most pleasure.
That's all we had time for. Be sure to catch us next week for another edition of I-24 News Defense Magazine. Have a good night.